We haven't done this video in quite a while, but I want to get back into responding to my viewers' bold predictions, so that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video today. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. And this first person says BYU will make the playoffs. And I completely agree with this take. I really like BYU and where this team is right now. They will be returning one of the most underrated quarterbacks in my opinion, and Jake Retzlaff. I like this team a lot heading into next season. So this take is not too bold, and I actually do think BYU will make the playoffs and win the Big 12. The next person says North Carolina wins 8 games, but the offense is atrocious. I do see this being a possibility. I'm personally not too high on North Carolina. I think they'll win 6 games or less. The offense is definitely a question mark. They're losing some big pieces, and the defense, we'll see how the defense is with Bill Belichick. A lot of people just expect Bill Belichick to turn this team around in 1 year, but they don't have a great roster, and last year they weren't that good. Last year they did make a bowl game, but they had one of the easiest Power 4 schedules, so it wasn't really much to ask for. So if Bill Belichick can get North Carolina playing really good defense, maybe they win 8 games. I just don't see it. This next person says Ohio State goes undefeated, wins the Big Ten, and they go back-to-back. I think it is possible, but it's also going to be very hard to do that, definitely in college football in this landscape today. And also, we have to remember that Ohio State lost both their coordinators and a bunch of veterans, a bunch of starters on defense. But on the bright side, they got a young 5-star quarterback in Julian Sayin. They got the 2 best players in college football returning in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. So I certainly think this is a team that is going to be in the playoffs and in the conversation, but I don't see them going back-to-back. This next person says West Virginia will be last year's Arizona State. And I completely disagree with this take. I'm not very high on West Virginia. They're losing a lot of pieces. They've been trending downhill and they lost Neil Brown at head coach. They just don't have a great culture right now, and I don't expect much from them. This next person says my Ducks will win the Natty. As an Oregon fan, I would love to see Oregon finally win the national championship. I think it is going to happen with Dale Lanning at head coach. But I don't think next year is quite the year, but I wouldn't really call this a bold prediction because it's certainly possible. Oregon is nearly bottom of the country for return on production, but they still have one of the most stacked rosters in the country, and they have a top 5 transfer portal and recruiting class for this season. So they have the talent, and Dante Moore will probably be just fine at quarterback. He's a former 5-star, so this really isn't that bold of a prediction. This next person says Duke will go 10-2 with losses at Clemson and at Syracuse, making them a contender for the ACC championship. And I know people want to buy into the hype with Manny Diaz and this team. They got Darian Mensah, an electric quarterback. They were a solid team last year, and they were a surprise, and they ended up winning 9 games. But they had a very easy schedule, and they weren't really that great of a team, to be honest. I do think Darian Mensah will be a good quarterback for Duke, but Malik Murphy also was solid as well. Darian Mensah is probably an upgrade from Malik Murphy, but he's not that better than Malik Murphy is. I kind of think Duke will be a similar team to last year. They're a solid football team, but they're just not that talented. I don't see them winning double-digit games. This next person says Austin Simmons is a Heisman finalist. And I believe Austin Simmons is the Ole Miss quarterback. I don't see him having a huge year for Ole Miss. I think there's going to be some struggles, because the offensive line is still a work in progress. Jackson Dart was one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, but that offensive line kind of derailed his stock. And I don't see Austin Simmons having a huge year. Ole Miss is losing a lot of pieces. I do think they could be a sleeper and maybe make the playoffs because of the defense, and they've really done a good job in the portal. But I just don't have great expectations for Austin Simmons, so I don't see this happening. This next person says Arkansas State makes the college football playoffs and Jalen Raymore is the best group of 5 quarterback and goes day 1 of the NFL draft. I think Arkansas State will be solid next year, but there's still some major concerns on defense, and there's some good group of 5 quarterbacks, so I don't really know how I feel about this take. You never know what can happen in college football. Surprise teams rise all the time, but I really do not see this happening. This next person says Kennesaw State goes 12-0, and I definitely think this is not happening. Keep your dreams alive though, because Kennesaw State does have a top 5 return and production rate in college football, so maybe. This next person says my Texas Longhorns will win the national championship, and I really don't think this is a bold prediction at all. I actually am predicting Texas to win the national championship as of now for next season. This team returns a bunch of veteran players on defense. They return Arch Manning at quarterback on offense. They just have a super talented roster and went to the semifinals the last 2 years. This team definitely could win the Natty next year. This next person says either Wisconsin, Arkansas, or Virginia Tech makes the top 10. I don't see it being Wisconsin or Arkansas. Wisconsin just is way too far behind in the Big Ten. And Luke Fickell has a ton of work to do there because they took a step back and didn't even make a bowl game last year. And as for Arkansas, they had a solid year last year. They do return Taylor Green at quarterback, but I just don't see them keeping up in the SEC with these other teams. Maybe they have a good year and upset a couple of teams, but it would take more than that for them to make it to the top 10. But Virginia Tech, they are a little bit more realistic to maybe be a surprise team and crack the top 10. This is a team that will be returning Kyron Jones for another season. Maybe he breaks out and has a massive year. Maybe with some of the pressure off of Virginia Tech this year, they step up and be like the team they were expected to be last year. Virginia Tech's an interesting team. They don't lose a lot of pieces, so maybe they'll be decent next year. So out of any of these three teams, if there was a team to crack the top 10, I think it would be Virginia Tech, but that's still saying a lot. This next person says Boise State will compete for a playoff spot despite losing Ashton Jeanty, and Maddox Matson will be a legit second to third round quarterback. I don't know if Maddox Matson is going to go that high in the NFL draft, but he is a very good quarterback. He's not that bad. I didn't have Boise State in my playoffs. They lost Ashton Jeanty, but they are near the top of the country for return in production. They have a solid squad. I expect the defense to be good again. I just don't see Boise State being that team again to make the playoffs without Ashton Jeanty, though. This next person says Georgia will be on upset alert against Georgia Tech. It's still way too early to tell. We don't know what's going to happen next season, but I will say it wouldn't surprise me at all to have Georgia on upset alert against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech nearly beat Georgia last year. So this is definitely a possibility, definitely with how that Georgia Tech team is looking with Brent Key right now. And this next person says Luke Fickell gets fired. I don't understand why Wisconsin just raised his contract extension all the way out to 2032. Maybe he still gets fired, but I do think Wisconsin will give him a bit more time even if they have a bad 2025 season. But honestly, I have Wisconsin at the bottom of my Big Ten standings. I am not expecting much out of them, and honestly, they should just fire Luke Fickell. This next person says Michigan State will take a huge step forward, contending for a playoff spot in their second year under Jonathan Smith. Aiden Childs will be a legit top 10 quarterback in college football. I really like this bold prediction because it's a very bold prediction, but I do think there's a slight possibility. Maybe Michigan State kind of replaces Indiana as that team from last year. And I do think if Aiden Childs fully develops, he will be a dangerous quarterback. He just needs to be more consistent and cut back on turnovers, but the dude has the skill set and he's very athletic. And I also trust Jonathan Smith as a head coach. I do think they will take a step forward. I don't see them making the playoffs, but I do think this bold prediction is possible. This next person says Carson Beck gets benched after a horrible start. Honestly, I do not see Carson Beck getting benched. I think people are doubting him way too much. I think he went from being overrated to underrated. But now he's going to be playing against some weak defenses in the ACC. There's no reason for him to get benched. He's got multiple years of experience and he is a good quarterback. I don't see him getting benched. This next person says Iowa will not be a legit contender as long as Kirk Ferentz is still their head coach. How is this a bold prediction? What are you saying? I definitely agree with you. And lastly, this person says Notre Dame's only loss before the playoffs will be against Navy. I have Notre Dame at 10-2. They have too many trap games on that schedule. They have a tough schedule. But Navy is definitely not one of those teams that Notre Dame is going to lose to. Notre Dame will handle Navy easily. Well, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You guys let me know some of your bold predictions down in the comments below. But let me remind you guys to like the video and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you guys love college football, then you'll love this channel because we upload a ton of college football content. So definitely consider subscribing and also consider checking out my socials down in the description below. But that is going to do it, guys, and peace out.